Hello guys, my name is Michal Hucko. Welcome to our another video of Pandas tutorial. In this video we're gonna talk about basic data frames, reading data frames. I will explain a little bit what is the data frame and I will show you how you can read data into Pandas data frame. Okay, so before we start, let's discuss what data we will use. Feel free to use any data you have in your computer or in your company which you are working with daily. I highly recommend using some structured data with multiple columns and lots of rows. In our case, I will use housing price regression data, which I will show you where you can find. Feel free to use everything. You can use data for classification regression. If you don't know anything about classification or regression, just wait until our next video where I will explain more details about the machine learning and the terminology which I'm using right now. Okay, so let's talk about the data which we're gonna use. For the purpose, I will use data from a website called kaggle.com. Kaggle.com is a place where you can find multiple free datasets used for the machine learning. Kaggle also provides you some example code used for the machine learning problems like regression and classification. So feel free to log in to the kaggle.com because you need to log in order to be able to download something from the Kaggle, and then put in the search the name house prices advanced regression techniques. Then in the data tab you can find the whole data set at the bottom where you can download it with this button. Okay, so feel free to download it. After downloading it, you will get a zip file which you can place to your desired location. In this case, I'm going to use the pandas tutorial folder, which I will use through the whole course. And then inside the house price datasets, after you unzip the file, you will find the data description.txt, which is the txt file with the description of the data. Sample submission CSV, this file is not like interested for you, we will not use it in this course. And then the test and train CSV, which is basically the data. More about the test and training dataset I will explain in the later videos and tutorials. So just feel free to think about this as a data inside there. Okay? During this course we will use pandas, and if you are interested in what versions I'm using with the libraries connected to the pandas, you can find them on my GitHub, linked in the description below. On this GitHub page you will find all the examples which I'm gonna code for you in this tutorial, so feel free to go there, check out the code there, download the code for you, and you can go alone with the code. But I highly recommend you to go through the examples on your own. Please write the code. You know you need to transfer the code into your brain through your hands, not just copying, not just pressing Ctrl C and Ctrl V. So please go ahead and write the code with me. Okay, and now as you can see, I'm in my terminal. If you don't know anything about the Python or any basics of the pandas, or the Jupyter, which we're gonna use through this tutorial, I highly recommend you checking my other previous videos on the Skillshare, linked on the Skillshare, so please feel free to go first through these videos, learn some basics and then come back. If you just have the knowledge from my previous courses, this should be sufficient for you to start with this tutorial, so feel free and let's go along with me. So as you know, this is the sign which says that we are running the virtual environment called pandas, and I have already installed all the libraries. So as I mentioned, there is the requirements.txt file, as you can see in my folder over here, with all the libraries which I'm using. So for example, if you go under the P, you will see that we're going to use the pandas 1.0.5, and then under the N is the numpy 1.19.0, so feel free to install this for you. All the other libraries will be installed along, but if you are just like if you don't care about the libraries, just go like pip install -r and the requirements.txt, which will install the packages for you, something like this: install r requirements.txt, press enter, and it will install all the libraries which I have installed locally in my computer, which I'm gonna use through this tutorial. Okay, but let's go into the coding. So we will run the Jupyter from the desired location. In this case, we're gonna run it from the Jupyter tutorial. So I'm going to run Jupyter lab, and this will open the Jupyter lab for me. As you can see, I'm on the localhost 8889 /lab. So maybe this can vary across the different versions of the pandas. So for example, you're gonna run the Jupyter on 8888. So just understand that this is the same thing. It's just the different port. You don't need to worry about this. So as you can see, I have pre-prepared some examples for you for each of these lessons. I will go through these examples with you. Some of them I'm gonna use to rewrite on my own. Some of them I'm gonna just show you from the file, but really go with me through this code and write them. So I'm going to create a new pandas notebook for this. Pandas means the name of the environment. If you have the name, I don't know, Michal, the name of the environment will be Michal. Okay, so before you do anything with the pandas, you need to import the pandas, and also I highly recommend to import NumPy because we will use NumPy quite often, and the shortcut for this is like NP. This is quite used in the data science community to call the shortcut for pandas as PD and the NumPy as NP. Okay, so right now what's the situation? As you can see, I have here the folder called house price dataset. And if you click inside there are these two CSV files. So one is called the train and the second is called the test, but basically this is the data which we're going to use. So if you open the train, you will see there are a lot of columns. Together there are 81 columns and about 1,400 rows. And what is this dataset? The dataset I'm going to use is describing the houses which were sold in America. And this dataset is dedicated for prediction of the target value, which is in this case sale price. So all these columns are describing the house which was sold for this sale price. So for example, here you can see the sale condition, which was normal. You have the sale type, which is some shortcut, and all the description about these fields you can find in this txt file. So if you open this txt file, there are the name of the columns, the name of the values, and an explanation. So for example, the column LA stands for type of LA access to property, and there are three types available in this column. One of them is called the gravel, second is paved, and the third not LA access. So as you can see, it's quite easy, quite simple. There are some numerical data, there are some string data. We will cover this later, but right now this is the dataset is located in the folder. Feel free to place your dataset in some desired folder. It's quite a good practice to have the folder for the data, which is sometimes called data and sometimes it's called differently, so feel free to call it as you want. So going back to the reading, the first thing which I want to show you is how you can read the CSV file into the pandas data frame. Well, many of you don't know what is the pandas data frame. Maybe you have some intuition about that. So this is exactly the lesson which I'm going to explain you the data frame logic in the pandas. So in order to read the data frame, pandas has a constructor called the data frame. If you press tab, you will get the autofill. And there you need to specify the path to the desired to the data frame you want to read. Okay, so in this case we want to create it from the constructor, right? So we can create the data frame, for example, from the string, from the list. So if I run it, as you can see, I created the data frame with column 0 because I didn't specify the name of the column, and row 0.1.2, right? So it's fairly easy to transfer basic Python data types into the data frame. I can, for example, transfer also the dictionary into the data frame. Let's say I'm going to have a key called Michal, and then the values will be this list of numbers. And when I run it, as you can see, the key will be treated as the column name, and then the value will be treated as the values in the data frame. If I want to change the index, I need to specify the index, which I can say. In this case it was 0.1.3.2. I can go and start with 3, for example. So if I run it, the index has changed, right? So as you can see, the data frame constructor is fairly easy. You can do a lot of stuff with it, but you have the data in the CSV file and you need to read the CSV file. And for this purpose, pandas provides you a function which is called the read CSV. And if you go to the read CSV and specify the location of the CSV like this, and you run it, it's gonna read the whole CSV and put it in the data frame for you. So as you can see, there are 1,460 rows and 81 columns. So you can assign this data frame to a variable, and we have now the data frame in the variable df. Yeah, so as you can see, because there are so many rows, Jupyter Lab is so clever that it is not printing the whole data frame into the output because it will take some time and it will, kill maybe some of your processors. if some of your CPUs, if you are running a data frame with million rows, which is quite a common use case, and with a lot of columns. So in this case, only sub part of the data frame has been printed for you. Quite often is to print the head of the data frame or a tail of the data frame. So it's up to you. So here you can see when you put the head, only 5 rows are going to be printed for you. So you have a nice little overview of this data frame. Okay, so read CSV is the function for you, which is the basic function for reading the CSV files. As you can see here, I show you that the read CSV function has a lot of arguments. For example, besides specifying the file path or buffer, which is the first argument, which is not like optional, you need to specify it. You can name it like this. Then you can specify the separator, which means what is the separator in the CSV file to separate the values. So it's quite simple. So if you go like CSV stands for comma separated values. So basically, how does this file look like? So if you go here and for example you open this file with the text edit tool, you will see that the values are separated by the commas, right, and the new lines. And then the Python knows internally that when it shows the comma, it knows that this is the new value, and when it shows the new line, it knows it's a new row, right? So, but sometimes, for example, if you export the CSV from the Excel, there are different like delimiters, like tabs and stuff like this. So here you can see if I change it to the semicolon, everything will be in one place because Python is treated it like it's looking for the semicolon to separate the values, but because there are no semicolons, it treats everything as a one value. Okay, so you can override this parameter and set it to whatever you want. The header, which says what is the row which is specifying the header. So for example, you can skip even the headers, right? And what is the header in this case is this ID, M, subclass, M zoning, right? And sometimes you have the CSV file which is missing the header and you want to put it there manually. So you can say that you don't want to read the header in this case. Then the names of the columns, you can override it. For example, in this case, I'm overriding it to numbers. So if I will read it like this, the name of the header will be just numbers. Then skip rows, if you want to skip some first rows. For example, it's quite typical for Excel to save CSV files with a bunch of additional data above the CSV, and then you can skip it with the skip rows. Number of rows you want to read. Sometimes you don't want to read the whole data frame, so you can specify how many rows you want to read. And then, for example, and this is quite useful, if there is a date time in your data, and you can directly parse the date time and specify the column indices where this date is being located, and then it will be read as the date time. Well, some of you are now confused. Well, I don't understand most of these things you said, but we will explain it later. Some of you found the answers which they were looking inside this tutorial. So I'm glad if I help you understanding a little bit how the pandas works. Besides reading the CSV files, you can read also the Excel, the HTML, JSON, Parquet, SQL table, which are different data sources, right? Some of you know Excel, some of you know HTML, JSON. Parquet is a very sparse data type, which is a highly compressed data format, which is quite used for big data, and it's connected with the databases like Hadoop and stuff like this. SQL is connected with the relational databases, and then you can directly read the table from the database and transfer it directly into the pandas. This is quite often used. Okay, so as you can see, this is the same code which I run. I'm reading the head of the file, but now look inside the data frame. So as you can see, every data frame consists of 3 things. There is the columns part, and in this case there are the names like strings, but the name of the columns can be treated the same way as the dictionary keys, right? So everything what is hashable. So for example, you can treat as a column name an integer value. You can treat as a column name a tuple, right? It's quite common to use the tuple. I will show you later in the tutorial to treat it as a column name. And the same rule stands for the indices. So in this case, we are using the number index starting from 0 going up to 4. But you can use, for example, the string index or the tuple index, which is again quite common. And the third important thing in the data frame, besides the index and columns, is the values. And values are everything inside there. And there can be almost everything. And I will show you and explain you later what everything can be inside the value part, right? So these are the most important parts of the data frame. So when we go next, quite a common use case is to read multiple data frames into multiple CSV files or multiple source data sources into one data frame. And as you can see, this is quite a common case, and also it's the case of this case, because you have two files. You have the train and the test CSV, right? You have two files. And for example, let's say you want to read it into one data frame. So what you can do, you can specify array, in this case, sorry, a list of paths to the files, to the data sources, and then we're gonna iterate through this list, and we're gonna read each of the data frame. And because I'm saying that there is no header, and then the index column is none, and I'm appending it to the array, and then at the end I'm concatenating one data frame under another one. So if I read this, yeah, I didn't run the code for the library because I'm using Jupyter Lab. And then if you look at the shape is bigger. It's not this 1400 because I'm having the train part and the test part concatenated after each other. So if you look at this, yeah, as you can see, this time we have much more rows and everything is connected, right? So this is quite a useful command to use to have in your pandas repertoire of commands, so you can basically use it mostly. Now we go next, because the data frame is an object. It has a lot of very essential attributes which you're gonna use through your data science road, right? So let's start with the basic attributes. One of the basic attributes is the access attributes, which will return two elements in the array, where the first is the index. In this case is a range index starting from 0 up to 1460. In this case it will be 1459 because the index is repeating, right? And then there is the column index, where you have the values for the columns. You can return the shape of the data frame. And then another useful attribute is the T attribute, which stands for transpose. And the transpose of the data frame is from the mathematics and works the same way as when you transpose the metrics. So all the rows will be treated as the columns, and vice versa. So all the columns will be treated as rows. So in this case, you will have 81 rows and 1460 columns, because I'm still working in the original data frame in this example. So if you read the original data frame here and go back to the transpose, you will see it's this one exactly. So then the shape, you can return the shape. Yeah, because some of the attributes are returning data frame, you can chain the calls. So as you saw previously, the shape is just returning the shape of the data frame. So how many columns and rows it have. So the transposed shape is 81 1460, but the normal shape is 1460 to 81, right? You can directly access the columns. With the columns, you can directly access the index with the index, right? It's quite straightforward and intuitive command, intuitive attribute. Then you can directly access the data types of the columns, and I will talk about the data types later more into deep. But as you can see, if you print the data frame head, you can see that the ID is consisting of integers, and that's the reason why the ID is integer 64. So 64-bit integer. MS subclass is again some integer values, so it's integer. And then you can see there is the MS zoning part, which has some strings inside there. And when you are talking about the strings or the word sentences, in this case, Pandas treats this as an object data type. And there is also a good example of the load frontage, which is a float, right? Then there is the attribute which says if the data frame is empty. Then with the one which is saying how many dimensions are there. So we have only 2 dimensions. We will talk about multidimensional data frames later. Then the whole size, which stands for the number of elements. Rows times columns basically is the result value. And then you can create from the data frame the array of arrays. So as you can see, this is the array, and inside the arrays for each of the column rows combination. So this is basically like you are creating a NumPy matrix. If you don't know anything about NumPy, you can think this about the 2-dimensional list of lists in the Python, right? And this command is not important right now. Find these were the basic attributes of the data frame. I highly recommend you to go through this code and try on your own. Before you press the run command, please try to answer what will be the output. This is the right way how you can learn new things, to guess the output before you run the command. Then if you are right, you will be satisfied that you understood this topic correctly. And if you will wrongly answer the question, you will be learning some new things. Okay guys, these were the basics of the pandas data frame. I hope I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much.